Hello and welcome to this edition of Talk Time. I am Paranjoy Guha Thakurta in the studio of Lok Sabha Television here in New Delhi, and in this edition of the program we are going to discuss the 12th five-year plan. The 12th plan began on the 1st of April 2012, but it wasn't until early December that the Planning Commission uploaded on its website the final version of the 12th five-year plan, and it was really on the 27th of December that the 57th meeting took place of the NDC. That's a National Development Council comprising chief ministers of all the 28 states of this country. And the NDC approved the plan. And in this edition of the program, we're going to look at to what extent the 12th five-year plan will be genuinely inclusive. That's what the document says, that there should be faster growth, that growth should be sustainable, growth should be inclusive. Are we really going to see inclusive growth? That's the issue we're going to discuss. Let me welcome the guests who are here with me in the studio. I have Dr. Mazher Hussain. He is Executive Director of COVA. COVA is an acronym for the Confederation of Voluntary Associations, a representative of civil society and based in Hyderabad. And Dr. Hussain was a member of the steering committee of the Planning Commission for the preparation of the approach paper to the 12th five-year plan. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mazher Bhai, for coming here. With us here is Srirangam. I think I got your name right this time. Okay. Sriram is teaches and trains those who aspire to join the civil services. Thank you so much, Sriram, for coming here. Right. Let me start with you, Dr. Mazher Hussain. In what way is the 12th five-year plan, and it's the fact that in its goal, right up front, it's talked about inclusive growth as an objective. But this is not new. I mean, in the past too, in the 11th five-year plan and in the past before, the government has talked about inclusive growth. So in that sense, is there anything different or unique in this particular plan document?
At the outset, I would like to compliment some of the very important concerns which have found their way into the planning process and the planning document. The very fact that the Planning Commission consulted a number of civil society organizations, and the fact that they are talking of inclusive growth, and through that plan document you will find a lot of concern expressed there about various sections, various marginalized sections. But there is a problem here.
And you feel that this, that a lot of it is lip service, is it right? Because in your article that you've written in the Economic and Political Weekly, in the issue dated 29th December, you've argued that despite the talk of inclusive growth, you're not sure whether it will actually happen, whether it will be actually implemented.
You see, actually what I find is that there is a lot of care and concern in the document for the poor and the marginalized. But the commitment, concrete commitment to address their issues in reality, that somehow seems to be missing. You see, this inclusive growth is not the first word for addressing the poor. All through, for the last 50 years, 40 years at least, we have been hearing first about development,
growth with equity,
empowerment. Empowerment was also used.
But we haven't actually seen it happening.
No, you see, actually, this is what I am saying. We have been using buzzwords. We have been transitioning from one buzzword to the other, and now the latest buzzword seems to be inclusive growth. But unfortunately, with all these buzzwords, we have not been able to give them a content. Okay. See, what is important is, it is very, very laudable that at least Planning Commission and whatever our government and others, policymakers, have taken note of the need for inclusion. Right. Need for empowerment.
All right, we'll talk about whether or not we are actually going to see inclusive development, whether growth will be not just sustainable but inclusive. But Sriram, would you describe this as the 12th version of the same plan, or is there something unique in the document, or do you believe, as Dr. Mazher Hussain was suggesting, that many of these intentions are, mere statements? It's almost like paying lip service.
But I want to quote Dr. Manmohan Singh, what he said in opening the NDC meeting on the 27th of December. What Dr. Singh said was, this is different because This plan is starting with the background that for the first time ever in the planning history, we made 7.9% rate of growth on average during the 11th five-year plan. He made 4-5 more points which are pretty encouraging about inclusiveness. One is the rate of growth of agriculture has been 3.3, which has never been the story so far, and agriculture is the area where 60% of the people of the country depend. So agriculture grows faster. It is good news for inclusiveness. Then he says the rate of growth of the country and the government special developmental interventions have taken care of poverty also. Year by year, 2% is the rate of reduction of poverty. So across the five-year plan
though there is a lot of dispute about measurement of poverty,
but then he goes ahead and says whatever the way you define poverty, reduction is a reality that can be attributed to inclusiveness. Then he says there is a wage rise of 6.8%. Poorest of the poor have benefited from Narega. That is good news. And finally, the real point is the 5 poorest states have grown at a rate which is higher than the national average rate of growth of economy. So on the basis of these 5 points, we can say, yes, we are turning corner, and that precisely is what the challenge is.
Would you go along with what Sriram said? He says that when the government is talking about inclusive growth, it's not just making, just saying this for the sake of saying it, that there has actually been the fast rate of growth of the economy has translated into more inclusiveness in the sense that poverty alleviation, the geographical, the disparities that existed between the most backward states and the more advanced states, all of these have shown signs of coming down. But you, Dr. Mazher Hussain, in your article you say that you are skeptical about these claims because you have pointed out, rightly so, that when you look at the Human Development Index of India and you see how the HDI or the Human Development Index of India has moved in the recent past, there is no reason to be optimistic at all. It has during the 11th plan period, there was a downward slide from 128th position to 127. And yes, and it's down 134th position in 2009 and
2011.
Yes, 11. So it's down from 128 position in 2000, 127 in 2005 to 134 in 2009 and 11. Yes.
See, first let me put one factor straight. That is, I don't mean to say and never meant that what Planning Commission or the Government of India is doing is only paying lip service. In my earlier intervention, also first intervention, I have made it very clear that there seems to be a concern. Had it been only lip service, they would have used this inclusive growth only in 1 or 2 places. But it comes right on the cover page and all through. It is almost like a leitmotif. So that I would like to salute, that I would like to acknowledge, that they are concerned about it. But unfortunately to me, this concern is not translating into seriousness in terms of achievement.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is, you see, you have this whole growth, and this is Sriram Sahab, what he has just mentioned about, the growth in different sectors and all that. One thing I would like to state here is, despite these growths, if you look at the nutrition levels, the 11th, the Human Development Report for 2011, which is again, part of the Planning Commission process, an institute attached to the Planning Commission, they have come out with stark.
You are talking about the report prepared by the UNDP, correct? The United Nations Development Program, which ranks different countries in the world?
No, I am talking.
You are talking about the Government of India's own HDI.
This report, Human Development Report 2011. Okay. And in that, one issue is about nutrition levels going down. It's consistently going down. The calorie intake going down. The protein intake going down. You see, ultimately for me, if you can't feed people, what how are you going to address poverty?
All right, I'm stopping you. I'm going to come back to this issue. It's a bigger issue. We'll discuss it. But Sriram, the point that Dr. Hussain is making, for the first time during the 11th five-year plan period, the average rate of growth of India's GDP, or gross domestic product, was almost 8%, 7.9% to be precise. Particular years, it grew at 9% or thereabouts, almost 9%. Despite that, many of our human development indicators are, to put it mildly, very pathetic. He's talked about nutrition. I can talk about other indicators, including, and we can also talk about whether this growth has been largely jobless. Your views?
There has been a report recently that since 2005, the growth that we have seen has been jobless, and some people go one step ahead and say it is job loss. But regardless, you have here a situation where, at least till about 2-3 years back, the latest statistics we don't have, we have had reduction of poverty, but at the same time, we have had increase of inequality. That is, the condition of the poor has not improved as fast as the rich people have got richer and richer.
To put it somewhat crudely, you will not say the poor have become poorer and the rich have become richer, but the rich have become richer far faster than the poor have become richer. Am I right?
Yes. In which case, can you really do anything about, including more people in this growth process? Geographically, we have so many programs the government is doing, Finance Commission is doing, Planning Commission is doing. Social interventions, India has seen some of the finest of them. 2.5 lakh crores of rupees are being put into so many interventions, like your Narega, like your National Rural Health Mission, Indira Gandhi Matrutva. And some of these schemes have been globally applauded, like your Balls Familia, like Indira Gandhi Matrutva, and such schemes where you put women in hospitals for their delivery, give them conditional cash transfers. They have been praised by Lancet. But the fact is, we have growth slipping. Our fiscal capacity.
Let's stop here for the time being, because indeed the rate of growth that has been assumed in the 12th five-year plan is, whether it will be achievable or not, whether 8% is feasible or not, given the current state of the economy, current state of not just India's economy, the current state of world economy. Let's talk about some of these issues. Let's talk about this issue of inequality in greater detail. I return to both of you, Dr. Mazher Hussain, as well as you, Sriram. We take a commercial break and I'll be back with you. We are looking at the 12th five-year plan. We are looking at whether or not the 12th five-year plan will genuinely result in growth that is not just faster, but sustainable and inclusive. We'll be back with you in a short while from now. Stay with us.
मैच खत्म हो गया?
मैं नहीं खेला।
क्यों? अरे क्या हो गया भाई? हैं? अरे क्या हुआ मेरे धोनी?
मैं आपका कोई धोनी वोनी नहीं हूँ पापा।
अरे क्या हुआ बेटा? बबलू?
मैं रनले में भागता हूँ ना तो थक जाता हूँ, हाफने लगता हूँ, कोई मुझे खेलने ही नहीं देता, अंपायर ही बना देते हैं।
बच्चे का जल्दी थक जाना, देर से समझ आना या बार बार बीमार पड़ना, ये सब कुपोषण के लक्षण हो सकते हैं। कुपोषण यानी सही पोषण का ना मिलना। गर्भ से लेके जन्म के पहले 2 साल बच्चों में इसका सबसे ज्यादा खतरा होता है। आज देश का लगभग हर दूसरा बच्चा कुपोषण का शिकार है, यानी शरीर और दिमाग से कमजोर। तो आइए मिलकर कुपोषण के खिलाफ एक जंग छेड़ दें।
बारिश का मजा तो सब लेते हैं, पर बारिश का पानी बचाने की बात कौन सोचता है? हाँ? बारिश के पानी का संरक्षण करें ताकि पानी की कमी न हो और आप जिंदगी का यूं ही मजा लेते रहें।
जल्दी मेरा बैग दो, बस मिस हो जाएगी। भैया लाया।
बाल श्रम एक दंडनीय अपराध है। ये कानून 14 साल से कम उम्र के किसी भी बच्चे को काम में लगाने से रोकता है।
बाल श्रम रोकिए, बच्चों को काम नहीं पढ़ाई का अधिकार चाहिए। उनकी सही जगह स्कूल है, ये उनका हक है।
मुझे पता है तुम्हें बर्थडे पे क्या गिफ्ट चाहिए।
क्या?
तुम्हें वो इम्पोर्टेड मोबाइल चाहिए था ना?
तुम्हें अभी तक याद है? सो स्वीट।
भाई साहब मोबाइल दिखाना।
हाँ जी जरूर, ये देखिए मेड इन चाइना है।
और अगर खराब हो गया तो क्या रिपेयर कराने चाइना जाए?
हैं? किसी भी इम्पोर्टेड प्रोडक्ट को खरीदने से पहले ये देख लेना चाहिए कि जिसने प्रोडक्ट इम्पोर्ट किया है उससे जुड़ी सभी इंफॉर्मेशन उस प्रोडक्ट पर मेंशन है या नहीं।
क्या बात है, आई एम प्राउड ऑफ यू। जागो ग्राहक जागो।
नमस्कार प्रधान जी।
नमस्कार।
ग्राम सभा के कुछ सदस्य आए हैं। महात्मा गांधी राष्ट्रीय रोजगार गारंटी अधिनियम के तहत हुए कामकाज के खातों की जांच करना चाहते हैं।
हाँ हाँ, क्यों नहीं। पंचायत के कामकाज का हिसाब मांगना ग्राम सभा का हक है।
ग्राम सभा की मीटिंग के दौरान पंचायत द्वारा कराए गए कामों की गुणवत्ता पर चर्चा के साथ साथ हिसाब किताब की जांच और काम पर किए गए खर्चों की पुष्टि की जा सकती है।
पंचायत द्वारा कराए जा रहे कार्यों में पारदर्शिता बनाए रखने के लिए सोशल ऑडिट बहुत जरूरी है।
गांव का विकास, भारत का विकास।
ये लो तुम्हारी खांसी की दवाई, इससे तुम्हारी खांसी चुमंतर हो जाएगी। इसकी शुद्धता की गारंटी बिल्कुल है। ये आयुष्मान।
मैं हूँ आयुष्मान की यानी शुद्धता गुणवत्ता का स्वस्थ प्रमाण। चाहे आयुर्वेदिक, यूनानी, सिद्ध या होम्योपैथी, कोई भी हो दवाई, सिर्फ अच्छी क्वालिटी से बनी दवाई ने मेरी पहचान पाई। तो फिर जब भी देखो मेरा निशान, तुम भरोसे से खरीदो श्रीमान। आयुष स्टैंडर्ड और प्रीमियम, दो निशान गुणवत्ता की पहचान।
ये पानी मेरा है। मेरा है नहीं, मेरा है।
तेरा मेरा मत कर सासू, ये पानी तो सबका है। थोड़ा थोड़ा बांट लो इसको, ये पानी तो सबका है। कैसे ये मुश्किल हल होगी, हम सबको ये सोचना है।
पानी बर्बाद नहीं करेंगे, थोड़ा थोड़ा इस्तेमाल करेंगे।
ऐसे भविष्य से बचने के लिए पानी बर्बाद ना करें और बारिश के पानी का संरक्षण करें।
इस घर में हर पल हो खुशियों की दिवाली, आने वाली जो भी हो नन्ही सी एक जान है आने वाली। ध्यान रहे प्रसव होने तक देख रेख हो पूरी, सही समय पे टीके गोली लेना है जरूरी। जच्चा बच्चा की सुरक्षा परिवार के हाथ, इस घर में हर पल हो खुशियों की दिवाली। सुन लो बात देखी हमने देखी।
जननी सुरक्षा योजना में पंजीकरण कराएं, सुरक्षित प्रसव और आर्थिक सहायता दोनों पाएं।
नमस्कार प्रधान जी।
नमस्कार।
ग्राम सभा के कुछ सदस्य आए हैं। महात्मा गांधी राष्ट्रीय रोजगार गारंटी अधिनियम के तहत हुए कामकाज के खातों की जांच करना चाहते हैं।
हाँ हाँ, क्यों नहीं। पंचायत के कामकाज का हिसाब मांगना ग्राम सभा का हक है।
ग्राम सभा की मीटिंग के दौरान पंचायत द्वारा कराए गए कामों की गुणवत्ता पर चर्चा के साथ साथ हिसाब किताब की जांच और काम पर किए गए खर्चों की पुष्टि की जा सकती है।
पंचायत द्वारा कराए जा रहे कार्यों में पारदर्शिता बनाए रखने के लिए सोशल ऑडिट बहुत जरूरी है।
गांव का विकास, भारत का विकास।
जी मेरा सामान तैयार है।
मैम आपको बिल बनाऊं या बिना बिल के चल जाएगा?
पैसा बताइए।
1550।
सर ये बिल न बनाने से हमारा क्या फायदा है?
बेटा बिल बनेगा तो टैक्स लगेगा। मैडम ये आपका बिल। सामान में कोई कमी हो तो बस ये बिल साथ में जरूर ले आइएगा।
ये है एक अनजान और समझदार ग्राहक में फर्क।
जागो ग्राहक जागो।
जिंदगी में अक्सर इंतजार करना पड़ता है, पर अपने सपनों के घर के लिए तो इंतजार मत कीजिए। यूनियन बैंक ऑफ इंडिया के होम लोन्स नाउ एट 10.5%, क्योंकि आपके सपने सिर्फ आपके नहीं।
Welcome back to our discussion on the 12th five-year plan. With me here in the studio of Lok Sabha Television, Dr. Mazher Hussain, Executive Director of COVA, the Hyderabad-based Confederation of Voluntary Associations, and Srirangam, who teaches and trains those who aspire to join the civil services. Mazhar bhai, let me ask you, this issue of inequality, and this concerns a lot of people, and you have in fact in your article in the Economic and Political Weekly suggested that one of the indicators for trying to measure whether we are really having inclusive growth is to bring the whole Gini coefficient. Now, for the benefit of those who don't understand these technical words, Gini coefficient is a term used by economists and econometricians to measure the levels of inequality. And according to some recent statistics, India is one of the most unequal countries in the world. I mean, among the most unequal, they say South Africa is the most unequal country. Brazil is among them, but Brazil has reduced its inequality in the last 10 years. Then come countries like the United States of America, the United Kingdom, but India is way up in that list. I mean, some people say India is more unequal than China. Some people say China unequal. No, but according to the Gini coefficient, China is supposed to be a little more unequal. So the issue is, when you look at the last few years, and especially the government's inability to control food inflation, it has actually sharpened and widened inequalities, because the poor, after all, spend a higher proportion of their incomes on food. Your views?
See, I agree with Sriram sir when he said that in the last few years, the general situation of people have been increasing, but at the same time, inequality is also increasing. The rich are maybe becoming much richer faster. One of the factors, I think, which the plan document and the plan approach has failed to address is measuring the growth of or rather the inclusion pattern. You see, if we need to measure inclusion of the excluded people, I think the most commonsensical and the best way would be to see if their growth is more than the national average.
Like he pointed out that 5 of the most economically backward states have grown faster, but these are the states as a whole. But you're not looking at the economic classes.
You see, we have to look at the communities, marginalized communities. See, states. The other factor which comes here again is this whole, focus on linking, assuming that growth will lead to development. Which is not always correct. You see, we have within our own country, there are certain states where growth may have been less, but they have been more inclusive.
Okay, I'll come back to you, but I want to ask you.
Yes, I would like to talk about Partha Das Gupta, that committee which went into inclusive national accounts. That report is on the website. There, to take off from what Sir has said about growth is not the same as development, there Dr. Partha Das Gupta committee, actually Dr. Partha Das Gupta, he says, GDP is a weapon. It is a macho figure. You grow, you get a lot of money, with that you buy weapons, and that is what counts. What does not count is how many people are becoming included in the growth process, how sustainable it is, and how human it is, how green it is. And that has struck me as something to build on from where Stiglitz Commission had left it the year before.
Okay, you know, in his article, I'm asking you first and then Mazher bhai to comment. He points out 2 sets of statistics. He said for the first time in history, 4 Indians have found a place among the 10 richest people in 2009.
Mukesh Ambani's personal worth is $25 billion.
That's correct, according to Forbes magazine and Fortune magazine.
But if that is not music to the ears of the socialists, I should tell you, Dr. Rangarajan, the authority on India's economy, chairperson of the PM's Advisory Council.
He's talked about a high rate of income tax.
For the super rich. And he's also contemplating inheritance tax.
All right, time alone will tell whether we'll see these measures in the coming budget. But the point is, and he points out, 3 out of 10 poor people in the world live in India. And you see the unusual phenomenon, as he says, of continuing poverty and marginalization in the midst of galloping plenty. To use Dr. Amartya Sen's quotation, the top 10% of India is perpetually in California, while the bottom 25 or 30% are in sub-Saharan Africa.
I want to correct here, on some parameters, sub-Saharan Africa is better than India.
Okay.
So please.
Yeah. All right. Your brief comment, then I'll go to him.
And to make it sadder, the definition of poverty in the country leaves a lot to be desired. Even Tendulkar text on poverty, Tendulkar definition of poverty, rural poverty, is reduction of calorie consumption and a little bit of money for health and a little bit of money for education, together adding up to 26 rupees at the current prices
and
in the rural areas.
And 32 in the
32 in the urban areas.
But according to the government, the new socio-economic and caste survey will be a better indicator
But
of
that will
poverty.
give you data based on which we have Abhijit Sen committee going into defining poverty, and we have Rangarajan committee going into redefinition of poverty away from the Tendulkar minimalism. How they would define, we have to see. But the point is, even when you have such a minimalist definition of poverty, we still have officially about 30% of the country under the poverty line.
That's right.
That is very distressing.
That is 1 out of 3 people in this
and
country.
what makes it even worse is, here on we're going to see this poverty grow because inflation is not yielding.
That's right, the point that we made, food inflation.
And the growth is slipping, point number 2. Current account deficit is widening.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that. Mazher bhai, in your article, you point to a report that was presented by the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, which is really a grouping of some of the richest countries in the world, which was released in December 2011. And according to that report, the top 10% wage earners in India make 12 times more, earn 12 times more than the bottom 10%. So, I mean, this is a period of time when GDP across the world was increasing at an unprecedented rate, and also in India. But that growth did not benefit the poor and the marginalized and the underprivileged.
In fact, you see, one thing which we have to understand, I think when we talk of absolute terms, in absolute terms, in India, I think poor have become poorer. In relative terms, for example, what they were earlier, say what they were 5 years back, maybe marginally their income may have increased.
But why do you say in absolute terms?
You see, by absolute terms in the context of inclusive growth philosophy, what is being given. Because in absolute terms, what I would like to see is the growth of these marginalized people increasing more, because then they catch up with the rest, and then it is inclusion. You know, when you are comparing their growth with their earlier status, that I think to me is not inclusion. They may be growing a little bit, but if you talk of inclusive growth, that means they are catching up with the rest. Unfortunately, what is happening in our country is, even if there is a marginal improvement in their situation in some places, they are not catching up with the rest. In fact,
in fact, you've also cited some figures of the way the Gini coefficient has moved in the last 2 decades, and you said that
from 3.32
to 0.38. And the ideal score is 0 and 1 is the worst possible score. So in other words, over the last 2 decades, that's a period of economic liberalization, loosely speaking, has seen inequality worsen in this country.
Very true. And that I think is because we have been, obsessed with growth and not with distribution.
No, this distribution has become a dirty word in the lexicon of a few people. For them, and I'll give you the argument. It's not that I believe in it. The argument is that unless we grow, unless the size of the cake becomes bigger, we don't have enough to distribute or redistribute.
You see, this is again, I think another fallacy which unfortunately most of our very distinguished economists have, is that of the workability of the trickle-down theory. That if you have enough growth, then automatically things will trickle down. Every parameter,
going back to Ronald Reagan's time.
Now, even this is what we are following.
Thatcher.
This is what we are following. If you look at the speech, the NDC of Honorable Prime Minister, it comes out like that. That if we grow, more people will benefit. Sorry,
what Dr. Singh says is, let there be growth. Growth will be employment intensive, which can be contradicted. Growth will be poverty alleviating, that can again be contradicted. That is okay. Even if you accept that growth is a precondition, then he says once there is growth, it will get government tax money. That can be done for Narega. But Dr. Amartya Sen says growth and equity should be simultaneous. I can't give you my land on which you build a factory in which I find the employee engagement. I want good price for my land, then I will give you my land. As you grow, I also grow. You can't cut a tree and dig for coal and power a power plant, and I will be a destitute and go on the Delhi metro. I can't wait for the trickle down. In history, it has never trickled down. So absolute simultaneity of growth and equity is what Development School of Economics tells us.
So in other words, where I think both of you are faulting the government and faulting, not what has been written in the 12th five-year plan document, but the manner in which government policies have been framed and sought to be implemented, and this is also implicit in the 12th five-year plan document, is that excessive emphasis on growth and not enough emphasis on ensuring that the benefits of this growth are evenly spread across geographical areas and weighted in favor of the underprivileged or the marginalized or the poor sections.
You see, actually, if you study the document closely, there is also this concern.
That's not easy, huh? For about 1500 pages or 1200 pages.
But then some people have done it. I have also tried.
You've also tried to do it. So I think Dr. Manmohan Singh has said, when he was asked which are the books you've read and which were the most difficult books you read, he mentioned the plan document as one of them. Yes, please go on.
So you see, in the plan document, what you find is that there is a concern all through that things have to be implemented properly. They have, in fact, in places they have even admitted. I mean, it is very, very laudable that we have failed in our implementation in the 11th five-year plan. That we need to get our process tightened. That there should be monitoring. They have mentioned monitorable targets. But unfortunately, what I find, there are 2-3 issues here that we need to look at. First and foremost, these monitorable targets, all of them are not monitorable. Some of them are very, very vague, and until and unless targets are very well defined, you cannot monitor them. The second thing is, what is the instrument, the tool by which you will monitor? The processes that you will use. So, actually for the GDP, you have adopted, for growth, you have adopted GDP as a tool. For inclusion also, you should adopt a tool. For inclusion also, you should, you are saying that we will include people. But then what is important is, you should also have, like for example, one thing which comes to my mind is, you can say this HDI which is there. Now it is 134. We will try and target it at 100.
All right.
All right. And somebody should attempt constructing an inequality adjusted GDP.
1 minute. That's a good idea, and let's see how we can do this. Let's move forward a little bit. I take one more break. I need to ask you a number of questions. How do you actually measure? How do you actually construct measures? How do you actually construct indices to measure whether or not growth has been inclusive or not? How can we, and I want you to also talk a little bit about what has happened in the recent meeting of the NDC. We'll talk a little bit about some of those issues. We talk about the Finance Commission too a little bit. So I get back to both of you. We are looking at the 12th five-year plan. We are looking at why growth in India has not always led to inclusion. Why, despite fast rates of growth, Indian society has become more unequal. Can this be changed? These are some of the issues that we're going to discuss. Stay with us. We'll be back with you.
नानी कपड़े गिनवाओ, 2 साड़ी, 2 शर्ट।
भैया या तो खुजाले या तो गिनवा ले।
क्या करे नानी, खुजली से बहुत ही परेशान है, बहुत इलाज कराए मगर कोनो फायदा ना है।
तो भैया यूनानी डॉक्टर के पास जा, जड़ी बूटियों से बनी यूनानी दवाएं बड़ी असरदार होती हैं।
दांत खाज खुजली से दे आराम यूनानी दवाइयाँ।
अरे नानी हम ठीक हो गए, थैंक यू नानी।
थैंक यू नानी नहीं, थैंक यू यूनानी बोल।
यूनानी की दवाइयाँ दे बीमारी से आराम।
बाल श्रमिक दंडनीय अपराध है। ये कानून 14 साल से कम उम्र के किसी भी बच्चे को घरेलू नौकर, ढाबे पर कर्मचारी या और किसी भी घातक काम में लगाने से रोकता है। अगर कोई व्यक्ति ऐसा करता है तो उसे 3 महीने से लेकर 1 साल तक की सजा के साथ साथ 10,000 से 20,000 रुपए तक का जुर्माना भुगतना पड़ सकता है।
बच्चों से काम मत कराइए, उन्हें पढ़ाई का हक है, उनका सही जगह स्कूल है।
नमस्कार प्रधान जी।
नमस्कार।
ग्राम सभा के कुछ सदस्य आए हैं। महात्मा गांधी राष्ट्रीय रोजगार गारंटी अधिनियम के तहत हुए कामकाज के खातों की जांच करना चाहते हैं।
हाँ, क्यों नहीं। पंचायत के कामकाज का हिसाब मांगना ग्राम सभा का हक है।
ग्राम सभा की मीटिंग के दौरान पंचायत द्वारा कराए गए कामों की गुणवत्ता पर चर्चा के साथ साथ हिसाब किताब की जांच और काम पर किए गए खर्चों की पुष्टि की जा सकती है।
पंचायत द्वारा कराए जा रहे कार्यों में पारदर्शिता बनाए रखने के लिए सोशल ऑडिट बहुत जरूरी है।
गांव का विकास, भारत का विकास।
अरे बहू। जी माँ जी। जरा चेक कर ले, कुछ सामान छूटा तो नहीं। 1 किलो चने की दाल। जी। राजमा 1 किलो, 1 किलो मूंग की दाल, 1 किलो शक्कर। जी।
माँ, आप क्या 1 किलो बोल रही हैं?
ये तो 900 ग्राम है।
हाँ?
जी हाँ, आप जब भी खरीदारी करें पैकेट के आकार से भ्रमित ना हो, उस पर छपी शुद्ध मात्रा की जांच कर लें।
Welcome back to our discussion on the 12th five-year plan. With me here in the studio of Lok Sabha Television, Dr. Mazher Hussain, Executive Director, COVA, the Confederation of Voluntary Associations based in Hyderabad, and Srirangam, who teaches and trains aspiring civil servants. Sriram, let me start with you on this occasion. You know, when the National Development Council meeting took place on the 27th of December, there was a much publicized walkout by Ms. Jayalalitha. She's the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, ostensibly because she had to cut her speech short. Every Chief Minister was given 10 minutes. She wanted to speak longer. Eventually, her complaint was that states are being treated like glorified municipalities. In that sense, she brought up the whole issue of federalism and the unitary character of our government, the union and the state. This is an issue that has been talked about and debated and discussed for decades on end. Do you think she was justified in walking out or in alleging that our state governments, our provinces are being treated like glorified municipalities?
See, she read her speech for 10 minutes. Every Chief Minister got 10 minutes. It's a one-day meeting. At the outset, it was decided every Chief Minister would get 10 minutes. So she had no reason to complain on that score, point number one. Point number two, I have read her speech where she says that the mismanagement of the economy by the union government has had debilitating influence on the state finances, state economy, etc. And she says we are glorified municipalities because we have to.
And that was a similar kind of refrain when you look at all the speeches of the chief ministers of the non-Congress or the non-UPA states.
They had certain complaints about we have power plants started, we are not getting coal for it, please do something about it. For which the Prime Minister said, please write to the Deputy Chairperson of the Planning Commission, tell him your problems, we will be able to handle it. After all, CIL is a central public sector unit and the fuel linkages will be able to
I think it goes
establish.
beyond Coal India Limited. Say somebody like the Bihar Chief Minister, Mr. Nitish Kumar, he also talked about that Bihar having continuing to get a raw
But
deal.
he's been asking for special category
That's
state
correct.
status because under the existing rules of what you call Gadgil formula, Rao Mukherjee formula, modified Gadgil formula, all being the same, center gives the states planning assistance. And in that you have two classes of states. 11 states, hilly states, border states with deficient infrastructure and hardly any revenue potential, they get plan assistance, 90% as grant and 10 as loan. All others like Nitish Kumar's Bihar and the Orissa with KBK region, they get 70% as loan and 30 as grant, and it is very attractive for any chief minister to get special category state status so that 90 need not be returned.
Now, 1 minute.
But it doesn't qualify.
1 minute. But what Nitish Kumar has been arguing, in when the state was bifurcated, and this was 12 years ago, this was more than 12 years ago in 2000, and Jharkhand was formed, it was at that point of time, there was an assurance of sorts, a verbal assurance, if nothing else, that Bihar
lived up to. They have given him a fiscal package.
No, but now he believes that he should get more. Ms. Mamta Banerjee feels that
have
you know,
always been demanding more. When they demand more, we cannot take it as a rational demand because center itself is fiscally strapped and center doesn't have infinite source of money. Therefore, the package has got number one. And I must also recall here the Union Finance Minister, Shri Chidambaram. He said Gadgil formula was coined early 70s. It's been recast early 90s and now is the time to revisit it because it's been a long time. So not all is lost for Mr. Nitish Kumar's demand.
1 minute. What about Ms. Mamta Banerjee? She's been asking for a moratorium, a 3-year moratorium on repayment of interest for 300,000, 3 lakh crore debt which West Bengal had, and
But
she
that-
says that this is the legacy of the left front government and she's unable to develop the state on account of
That
this.
is not a maintainable demand. That is the problem we have in a democracy. Every 5 years you could have the government changing, point number one. Point number two is there is a moral hazard to it. You could mess up your fisc and ask the center not to expect the loans to be given back. So her demand is utterly irrational. Even then the center, Dr. Singh replied in his concluding speech that yes, we have a special package. KBK, Orissa, Bengal, Bihar, for all of them we have a special package. Even Mr. Chidambaram tried to pacify them by saying the special category state status norms can always be reconsidered should the ground level situation demand the same.
All right. Dr. Mazher Hussain, do you go along with what Sriram is saying? He's arguing that the states have always wanted more, like Oliver Twist, always wanting more. Okay. No, but 1 minute. That in a sense, Ms. Jayalalitha, Ms. Mamata Banerjee are being unreasonable in their demands. And the argument is that, okay, this has always been the case. The counter argument is that, look, the states argue that they're today fiscally strapped for funds on account of policies of the union government or the central government over which they have no control. How we have not been able to find that balance. I mean, the federal structure of our country, at least periodically, gives an impression that it is straining and straining hard. Your views?
First, I'll give you a view of Mahatma Gandhi. Before independence, when somebody had asked him, what is your idea of India? He had said, my idea of India is 5 lakh self-sufficient, self-reliant villages. 5 lakh, at that point maybe 5 lakh villages.
We have more than 5 lakh.
Now we have
maybe 6.5 lakh.
6.5 lakh villages. But unfortunately, over the 60 years, what we have now is Delhi, New Delhi and New Delhi.
1 minute.
Villages are, I don't know.
Many people argue, even then, when Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was alive and well, the famous debates he had, including with his own protege, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, that this whole idea of the self-sufficient village was a bit of a utopian context. Where does industry fit in? Where does modern, quote-unquote, industry, power plants, roads, etc. come into the picture?
Fine. You see, the thing is, it is just a matter of proportions. What proportion of autonomy will you allow your villages, and what proportion of autonomy will be there for the districts, for the states, and for the national government or national, for the center. Now, unfortunately, I mean, I would personally, if I am given an option, I would say something like about 70% of the autonomy should vest with the local bodies, because 70% or more of your life, your water, your electricity, your roads, your education.
That's what even somebody like Manishankar Iyer, the Panchayati Raj, former Panchayati Raj.
Of course.
He's arguing we haven't given the Panchayati Raj institutions adequate power.
Not at all.
He is evangelical.
So what I would like to say is, our lives, 80% of our lives don't depend on outside our village or outside of our locality, city or town. So let there be 80%, or if not 80%, at least 70% control of over our own selves. Then the second aspect is, you can give a little bit to the states and to the center, whatever is proportionally required. But unfortunately, what is happening now is 80% is there with the center, maybe 10-15% with the states, not even 5%. Let me just complete one thing. One more important thing, it's not just the political or administrative angle that we have to look at. If you look at even the taxation.
All right, let's ask him to bring in the taxation angle. So in a sense, he's not agreeing entirely with you that the states are in a sense, you are arguing that they're being unreasonable in their demands, but he's saying not so. He's saying we don't have adequate devolution of financial powers, on economic powers, on fiscal powers, and so on and so forth. And I'd like you to link this whole issue of backwardness of particular states or particular geographical regions and what can be done with what's happening. I mean, we have the 14th Finance Commission, and what is the relevance of the new 14th Finance Commission as far as the 12th five-year plan is concerned?
See, there is a brilliant paper written by one Goldman Sachs person about total factor productivity. That is, all the input productivity added together is less than the total output. Why? Because you got the right policy. For example, GST, if you have, you're going to add 1% more to the GDP.
But we have been struggling for over a decade to put together a common goods and services tax. But the government has been literally postponing each deadline. I mean, a lot of people talk about economic reforms, but people could argue that this is the single biggest economic reform measure to unite our market, which we haven't been successful so far.
GST, the central government is proposing, states are not accepting, purely for political reasons, because GST, since 1999, we have been marching towards a GST. Initially, sales tax reforms and VAT, and the state sales tax becomes VAT. And now we have a 115 constitution amendment bill in Lok Sabha, and states have fictitious reasons like fiscal autonomy.
1 minute. Is it a fictitious reason, fiscal autonomy? Or do the states have a genuine fear that their already strapped revenue situation will worsen? Because this whole issue of compensation by the center remains unresolved.
But compensation is in two ways. One is, I will give you whatever you may be losing, a little bit of that, and the rest of it you raise your VAT and recover the money. That's been mutually agreed between the center and the empowered group of finance ministers headed by Mr. Sushil Modi. So you can't get into a deal and back out of it purely for petty short-term politics. That is point number one. Point number two, once the GST kicks in, states also will be beneficiaries as a nation benefits.
1 minute, do you go along with his view? He's saying states are being, this is petty politicking going on. That's why we don't have a common goods and services tax. I mean, I'm going back to Sriram's argument that the states are being unreasonable. You have been arguing something which is quite different. You're saying states are genuinely feel that they don't have adequate powers, adequate financial powers, adequate fiscal powers.
We have to revisit and reinvent our entire taxation system, I think, on two counts. One is where this tax revenue will be located first, whether it will be centralized collection or whether it will be distributed. That will also determine to a large extent the administrative and political economy, devolution of administrative and political economy. You cannot have administrative and political powers at the grassroots if all the tax is being collected at the center or going to the center.
All right.
The second one is again how much you tax the rich and how much you tax the poor. My organization had conducted one study in 2008, and we found that the poorest of the poor, the beggars, the rickshaw pullers and all these people, if you calculate the amount of indirect taxes they pay, it is 14% of whatever their expenditure.
That's correct. Basically you're arguing that we have a highly regressive taxation system.
Policy, yes, we need to.
All right, I'll tell you what. We have one last segment of this discussion. I'm going to return to both of you, and I'm going to look at this whole issue of growth versus equity all over again. The economy grew at close to 9% during the 11th five-year plan. There is still a target that during the 12th five-year plan, which started on the 1st of April of 2012 and will go on till the 31st of March 2017, that the economy will grow on an average of 8%. Many believe that this is an extremely unrealistic target. This is aspirational but not realistic. Therefore, let's talk about what could happen, what may happen,
jury is out,
and what should happen. Let's talk about some of these issues. We'll be back with you in a short while from now. We are looking at the 12th five-year plan. We are looking at issues related to inclusive growth, inclusive development. We'll be back with you in a short while.
Raindrops are falling on my head, जैसे कोई प्यार की फुहार छुए मुझे बहती रहे. मौसम में है रवानी, जिंदगी बनी सुहानी.
बारिश का मजा तो सब लेते हैं, पर बारिश का पानी बचाने की बात कौन सोचता है? बारिश के पानी का संरक्षण करें और जिंदगी का यूं ही मजा लेते रहें।
जल्दी मेरा बैग दो, बस मिस हो जाएगी। लाया भैया लाया।
बाल श्रमिक दंडनीय अपराध है। ये कानून 14 साल से कम उम्र के किसी भी बच्चे को काम में लगाने से रोकता है।
बाल श्रम रोकिए, बच्चों को काम नहीं पढ़ाई का अधिकार चाहिए। उनकी सही जगह स्कूल है, ये उनका हक है।
कितने में देंगे?
इसमें एमआरपी लिखा हुआ है।
फिर भी एमआरपी पे तोलमोल तो कर सकती हूँ ना?
बहन जी, सरकार की तय गई हुई एमआरपी पे तोलमोल?
जी नहीं, सरकार एमआरपी तय नहीं करती। जी हाँ, इसे तो उत्पाद निर्माता तय करते हैं और इसमें आपके होलसेलर, डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर और लोकल दुकानदार का मुनाफा जुड़ा होता है। इसीलिए आपका हक बनता है कि आप भी एमआरपी पे तोलमोल कर सकते हैं। जागो ग्राहक जागो।
Welcome back to the fourth and the final segment of this discussion, which looks at the 12th five-year plan and whether or not the growth that has taken place and that will take place in the foreseeable future would be truly inclusive. Will it create jobs? Will it widen or narrow disparities? Will it result in more geographical balance? These are some of the issues we are discussing. With me here in the studio of Lok Sabha Television, Dr. Mazher Hussain of COVA, the Confederation of Voluntary Associations, and Srirangam, who teaches and trains aspiring civil servants. Dr. Hussain, this whole issue of growth, as we've already discussed, according to you, this government has laid excessive emphasis on growth, not enough on inclusion, not enough on distribution. But even this growth target of 8%, many believe is unrealistic. Many argue that in the current financial year, which will end 31st of March, we'll be lucky if we grow by about 5.5 or 6%. Some people say 5%, some people say 6%. Given the state of the world economy, Europe in double dip recession, Japan in recession, the US economy not doing all that well, people are rather skeptical about the ability of the Indian economy to grow anywhere near 8% in the foreseeable future. And if, say, 2 years in a row you grow at 5 or 6%, then that 8% target becomes all the more difficult to achieve over a 5-year period. Your thoughts on the subject?
I wouldn't be very concerned about the rate of growth, whether it is 8%, 12%, 2%. My concern is not growth. My concern is inclusion. That everybody should be on board, that our poorest of the poor, our marginalized, do better, do best. Now, it is proved all over, many times over, that growth may be sufficient and may be necessary for development, inclusive development, but it is not sufficient. Just because you grow doesn't mean everybody will be growing together. That point number one. The second point is, even if we don't grow at whatever rate, if we grow less, supposing, I think the first casualty will be the social development programs. See, whatever your for whatever programs that you have for the poor, they will be the first to be cut. Supposing instead of 8, we are growing at 6% or 5%.
And you are saying tax concessions which big corporates get won't be cut?
Of course they will not be cut. They will not be cut. In fact, our whole history, in the past 10, 15, 20 years, we have seen that these tax concessions have been growing, galloping. Tax concessions
over 500,000 crores,
yes, so
according to the budget documents.
Yes, budget documents. And
tax expenditure.
Yeah, and
that's right.
The important point, I think, here again I will come back to this whole argument of inclusion, because I think the country, the objective of any country cannot be how rich we become, but how happy and how prosperous our every citizen is.
All right. Okay, you made your point. Sriram, I think there's a basic difference in philosophy and ideology. Growth for the sake of growth, or growth to increase human happiness, growth to ensure that the marginalized, the underprivileged, the poor. You mentioned Brazil earlier, and you compared that with Manrega, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program, said to be the world's largest social security. But in Mazher Hussain's article in the Economic and Political Weekly, he makes an interesting observation. Unlike Brazil, that spends about 15% of its total income, national income, is GDP, on various social security schemes and social protection schemes. We barely spend 5%. So what are we really talking about when we talk about growth and we talk about inflation?
I was trying to connect. You see, we have great interventions like public distribution system, and we have such a massive social safety net like Narega. And the government's policies, first time the government is contemplating, well on its way, supply of free generic medicines through all the primary health centers.
That's a proposal maybe which might see in the coming budget.
Which should see light of the day any time now. And these are the things, and our intellectual property right regime till recently, till 2005, the whole world was applauding. So I was saying India has as much of points of pride as Brazil's Bolsa Familia, and we should retain them. Our conditional cash transfer schemes praised across the world, like Indira Gandhi Matrutva, conditional cash transfers, they should also be nourished. And this hurry we are showing in these technological fixes and throwing of money into the bank accounts.
The Aadhaar scheme, the unique identity scheme.
Yes, and that has to be substantively reviewed so that we nourish our institutional interventions.
You talked about the public distribution system. You know, I mean, a lot needs to be done to improve its quality. The whole issue is, should we have a food security scheme or a food security act and universalize that PDS, or should we continue with a targeted system with its inherent limitations and its
we
problems?
have to go for the universal public distribution system. Chhattisgarh has done it already.
It's already talked about a food security
They have made
act,
law,
yes.
But we have been talking and talking about this proposed food security bill for the last 5 or 6 years. We should do it, and all the advantages that it carries with itself, producing more and streamlining the public distribution system, taking care of that. So it will be a blessing for the entire agro economy of the country, for the consumer welfare, food security, and also that Hangama report where we have shown so many children to be malnourished, that can also be taken care of by this. So public distribution system cannot be sidelined by throwing money into
And when
the
you
bank
talk about
accounts.
hangama, you should sort of
Hunger and
explain
malnutrition.
hunger and malnutrition. Yes.
So public distribution system to be replaced by putting money, transferring money on the basis of a 12-digit number. This can be a travesty of justice, and this can be a breach of the constitution.
All right.
If the government is contemplating.
Okay, we are kind of nearing the end of our discussion. Dr. Mazher Hussain, you know, you made a number of points about why you need to put together one, proper indicators to measure whether growth has led to inclusion. You're talking about Gini coefficient, you're talking about human development indices. What, according to you, are the top priorities? The government's top priority should be to ensure that growth is truly inclusive, that growth results in benefits reaching the underprivileged and not just trickling down to them.
You see, apart from GDP and apart from Gini coefficient and HDI, which are there are others also. In fact, I have also proposed to the Planning Commission 2 years back in 2010 one concept of peace and equity audit. That any scheme, any program that you are thinking of contemplating or devising, you should first look at it whether it will lead to inequity. And because inequity.
You think these are measurable? You think these are predictable? Or are you talking in the air?
No, no. You see, actually, we can develop over a period of time if you are just like, you know, what about gender audit? Gender audit.
We've been talking about,
but then environment audit. It was a concept at one point of time, but over a period of time you have fleshed it out. You have to work at it to flesh it
now
out.
you have environment impact assessment, you have social impact assessment.
So similarly with peace and equity audit also it is possible. You can flesh it out.
Water audit is there, environmental audit is there.
So, you know, here it is very simple. And if it is leading to inequity, I mean, if you are throwing people out of their land, if you are not taking proper care for their rehabilitation, then naturally it is going to lead
Are you
to
expecting the new Land Acquisition Act to be, enacted in the near future?
For political reasons, it might get enacted.
But it's not even introduced in the
parliament
I
now.
know. It's before a standing committee at this particular point of time.
But then
the bill is.
Yeah. But then I do not know, how much time it will take. But at the same time, you see,
no, I mean, some of the ruling party people have talked about the cash transfer, the direct benefits transfer scheme as a game changer, political game changer. The government doesn't have too much time before the next general elections.
It is certainly a game changer for the ruling party.
So you think the ruling party stands to gain?
Of course it will stand to gain if they announce it, but I have strong reservations about this, because what happens when you do, there are two levels at which where support is required to the poor. One is in terms of scholarships, widow pension, old age pension, all that. There this will help, this will really help. But when you are trying to dismantle your public distribution system,
that won't work.
That will change the entire work culture of the people.
All right. I'll let you have the last word on this program. The top priorities that we need to show that the manner in which the implementation of the 12th five-year plan takes place.
Before that, I would like to connect what Mazher sir said to what Joe said the day before. If you are not growing at 8 or 7 or 6, that's not the end of the world. Sir was saying 2%, 1%, but inclusion, gender equity, self-respect, and partly that is based upon empowerment, resource access and so on. So it's all inclusion, growth and inclusion taking place simultaneously.
All right. Thank you so much, Sriram, for coming here to the studio. Thank you, Dr. Mazher Hussain, for coming here. And time alone will tell the extent to which the 12th five-year plan and the manner in which it is implemented in the coming 4 years and just a little longer will truly result in economic growth, resulting in sustainable and inclusive development. Thank you very much for being with us on this program.
चलो भैया। क्या कह रही थी हमारी गुड़िया रानी की मास्टरनी जी? बता भी दो ना।
ठीक से बैठ। क्या कहेगी? हाँ? ये तुम्हारी राज दुलारी है ना? पढ़ने लिखने में मन तो लगता नहीं इसका। सब तुम्हारे लाड प्यार का नतीजा है। पता नहीं ध्यान कहाँ रहता है इसका। कमबख्त कहीं की।
बच्चे का पढ़ाई में ध्यान न लगना, देर से समझ आना, बार बार बीमार पड़ना, ये सब कुपोषण के लक्षण हो सकते हैं। कुपोषण यानी सही पोषण का न मिलना। गर्भ से लेके जन्म के पहले 2 साल बच्चों में इसका सबसे ज्यादा खतरा होता है। आज देश का लगभग हर दूसरा बच्चा कुपोषण का शिकार है, यानी शरीर और दिमाग से कमजोर। तो आइए मिलकर कुपोषण के खिलाफ एक जंग छेड़ दें।